Okay, guys, so I forgot to post yesterday, and we have several characters that I'm going to go over today. I'm going to start with the monk, reading and explaining kind of like his personality and try to help you to understand this information better. So I'll start by reading. A monk there was, one of the finest sort, who rode the country, hunting was his sport. A manly man, to be an abbot able, many a dainty horse he had in stable. His bridle, when he rode, a man might hear, jingling in a whistling wind as clear, aye, and as loud as does the chapel bell, where my lord monk was prior of the cell. The rule of good Saint Bennet or Saint Mar, as old and strict he tended to ignore. He let go by the things of yesterday and took the modern world's more spacious way. So he didn't believe in the things of old. He was more of what they would consider a modern monk, but not necessarily a good monk. Okay, he would have been corrupt. He's obviously doing things he's not supposed to, and he's taken a vow, and he's breaking the vow that he's made. He did not rate that text as a plucked hen, which says that hunters are not holy men, and that a monk uncloistered is a mere fish out of water flapping on the pier. That is to say, a monk out of his cloister. That was a text he held not worth an oyster. And I agreed and said his views were sound. Was he to study till his head went round, poring over books and cloisters? Must he toil as Austin bade until the very soil? Was he to leave the world upon the shelf? Let Austin have his labor to himself. And the person that they're talking about, this Austin guy, stands for St. Augustine, and he was a bishop, and he criticized lazy monks and suggested that they do hard manual labor. And he was like, so our monk is like, I'm not doing all that. This monk was therefore a good man to horse. Greyhounds he had, as swift as birds to course. Hunting a hare, a riding at a fence, was all his fun. He spared for no expense. So he's a big hunter. He spends all of his money on things for hunting, like horses or to have good dogs, hunting dogs. It says, I saw his sleeves were garnished at the hand with fine gray fur, the finest in the land. And on his hood to fasten it at his chin, he had a wrought gold cunningly fashioned pen. So he's got a pen and it's gold. And I mean, doesn't that seem odd? Because he's supposed to not be a worldly man. So he has a very worldly thing here, and it says it's into a lover's knot it seemed to pass. His head was bald and shone like looking glass. So did his face, as if it had been greased. He was a fat and personable priest. His prominent eyeballs never seemed to settle. They glittered like the flames beneath a kettle. Supple his boots, his horse in fine condition. He was a prelate fit for exhibition. He was not pale like a tormented soul. He liked the fat swan best, and roasted whole. His palfrey was as brown as is a berry. And that's his horse they're talking about. Another thing that you need to note is that he has fur. It says with fine, his sleeves of his monk's cloak, or it has sleeves of fur. So again, that's something else that would be worldly, that most monks would not have. Okay, the next character that we're going to talk about is the friar. There was a friar, a wanton one and merry, a limiter, a very festive fellow. In all four orders there was none so mellow, so glib and gallant, phrase and well-turned speech. He'd fixed up many a marriage, giving each of his young women what he could afford her. He was a noble pillar to his order, highly beloved and intimate was he, with county folk within his boundary, and city dames of honor and possessions, for he was qualified to hear confessions. Or so he said, with more than priestly scope. He had a special license from the Pope. Sweetly he heard his penitents at shrift, with pleasant absolution for a gift. So if you pay him the right amount, then he'll give you an easy penance for your sins. He was an easy man in penance giving, where he could hope to make a decent living. It's a sure sign whenever gifts are given to a poor order that a man's well shriven. And should he give enough, he knew in verity the penitent repented in sincerity. So if you paid him more, you must be really sincere and feeling really bad for what you've done. For many a fellow is so hard of heart, he cannot weep for all his inward smart. Therefore, instead of weeping and of prayer, one should give silver for a poor friar's care. So he's like, don't cry and worry about all this. You just give me a good gift, and I will absolve you from your sins. And he kept his tippet stuffed with pins for curls and pocket knives to give to pretty girls. And certainly his voice was gay and sturdy, for he sang well and played the hurdy-gurdy. At sing-songs he was champion of the hour. His neck was wider than a lily flower, but strong enough to butt a bruiser down. He knew the taverns well in every town, and every innkeeper and barmaid too, better than lepers, beggars, and that crew. For in so eminent a man as he, it was not fitting, with the dignity of his position, dealing with the scum of wretched lepers, nothing good can come of commerce with such slum and gutter dwellers, but only with the rich and victual sellers. But anywhere a profit might accrue, courteous he was, and lowly of service too. Natural gifts like his were hard to match. He was the finest beggar of his batch, and for his begging district paid a rent. His brethren did no poaching where he went. For though a widow mightn't have a shoe, so pleasant was his holy how do you do, he got his farthing from her just the same before he left, and so his income came to more than he had laid out. So even if the parishioners didn't have any money, he would still get something from them. Okay? He was that good at what he did. Before he left, and so his income came to more than he had laid out. And how he romped just like a puppy. He was ever prompt to arbitrate disputes on settling days for a small fee, in many helpful ways. Not then appearing as your cloistered scholar, with threadbare habit hardly worth $1, but much more like a doctor or a pope. Of double worsted was the semicope upon his shoulders, and the swelling fold about him like a bell about its mold. When it is casting rounded out his dress, he lisped a little out of wantonness, to make his English sweet upon his tongue. When he had played his harp, or having sung, his eyes would twinkle, and his head as bright as any star upon a frosty night. This worthy's name was Hubert, it appeared. Okay? And then last for today is the merchant. There was a merchant with a forking beard and motley dress. High on his horse he sat, upon his head a Flemish beaver hat, and on his feet daintily buckled boots. He told of his opinions and pursuits. In solemn tones he had harped on his increase of capital. There should be sea police, he thought, upon the Harwich Holland ranges. He was expert at dabbling in exchanges. This estimable merchant so had set his wits to work, none knew he was in debt. He was so stately in administration, in loans and bargains and negotiations. He was an excellent fellow all the same. To tell the truth, I do not know his name. Okay, so the merchant, he was really good at what he did, but he... one theme that you'll notice in literature in general is appearance versus reality, and he appeared to be very rich. He appeared to have many fine things, but in reality, he's actually in debt. So he's not what he appears. Okay, and we'll stop there, and I'll pick up with the student next.